One evening, a man stumbles home, his steps unsteady and the scent of alcohol heavy in the air around him. As he maneuvers through the doorway, he finds his wife waiting for him, her face etched with unhappiness. She is clearly upset, with her arms crossed and impatiently tapping her foot on the floor. "What time do you call this?" she demands, her voice sharp with annoyance. "Where have you been until this hour?" Gathering his hazy thoughts, the man begins to explain. "I found this incredible place to spend the evening. It's called the Golden Saloon. You won't believe it, but everything there is golden. They have massive golden doors. The entire floor is like walking on gold, and you wouldn't believe it, but even the urinal is gold." His wife, who has had many years of experience dealing with his drunken tales, is far from convinced. She suspects it's another fanciful story crafted to cover up his late-night antics. The next day, driven by a mix of curiosity and the desire to catch her husband in a lie, she decides to do some detective work. She rummages through the phone book until she finds a listing for the Golden Saloon located on the other side of town. Determined to uncover the truth, she picks up the phone and dials the number. The phone rings for a moment before a bartender on the other end picks up, and he answers, "Golden Saloon," in a businesslike tone. The wife, wanting to get straight to the point, starts her interrogation. "Is this really the Golden Saloon?" she asks, her tone skeptical. "Yes, ma'am, it is," the bartender responds, a hint of pride in his voice. Intrigued but not fully convinced, she continues her questioning. "Do you actually have giant golden doors at the entrance?" "Absolutely," the bartender replies confidently. Growing more curious, she proceeds, "And the floors, are they really golden?" The bartender, sensing her skepticism, reassures her, "Yes, ma'am, our floors are indeed golden." Then she hesitates before asking, "And what about the urinals? Are they really golden?" Upon hearing this, there's a significant pause on the line, leaving it in silence. Then she hears the movement and the muffled sound of the bartender covering the receiver and calling out to someone in the background. "Hey, Duke, I think I've got to lead on the guy that pissed in your saxophone last night." The CEO of a company found himself in need of a new secretary. He placed advertisements all over town seeking candidates for the position. A few days later, there was a knock on his office door, and to his surprise, it was a dog. The dog had a newspaper in its mouth and, with a paw, opened it to the classified section where the CEO had posted the job ad. The CEO was both amused and skeptical, but decided to play along. He said, "Well, I need a secretary who understands the basics of computers." To his astonishment, the dog strolled over to one of the secretary's desks, hopped onto a chair, and calmly turned on the computer and printer. Impressed, the CEO pressed further. "That's great, but I also need a secretary who knows how to work with spreadsheets." Without hesitation, the dog opened Excel, skillfully scanned through rows and columns of data, and then used pivot tables to create comprehensive charts and graphs. The CEO, now thoroughly amazed, decided to push the limits, saying, "This is fantastic, but my secretary must be bilingual." A charity worker pays a visit to a highly successful businessman in their town to inquire why he has never made charitable contributions to the community. The charity worker asks, "Sir, you've achieved considerable success in this town, and the community has supported you greatly. Could you please share why you've never considered giving back to the community?" The businessman responds, "Let me explain. Were you aware that my wife's mother has been battling an illness for several years, requiring continuous medical care and incurring significant expenses?" The charity worker admits, "I wasn't aware of that." The businessman goes on, saying, "My brother is also facing challenging circumstances. He has 7 children, including 2 with severe disabilities. He recently experienced a workplace accident due to unsafe conditions, which led to his termination, and he's encountering difficulties in securing fair compensation." The charity worker offers sympathy, saying, "I'm genuinely sorry to hear about these hardships." The businessman doesn't stop there, adding, Furthermore, my own son, along with his new wife and their newborn baby, had their house destroyed by a falling tree during a storm last year. Unfortunately, their insurance provider hasn't provided any financial assistance. The charity worker expresses regret, stating, "I apologize for taking up your valuable time." The businessman interrupts, saying, "If I haven't assisted any of them financially, why would you expect me to contribute to your cause?" Once upon a time in a small town, a man passed away, leaving his wife in a state of sorrow. As is customary, the widow decided to make arrangements at the local funeral home. Upon her arrival, the funeral director offered his condolences and began discussing the necessary preparations for her husband's funeral. "We have several fine black suits available for your husband," he informed her. However, the widow, reminiscing about how dashing her late spouse always looked in blue, felt compelled to inquire, "Is it possible to dress him in a blue suit instead?" The funeral director, always willing to accommodate the wishes of the bereaved, agreed. Nevertheless, he felt obligated to mention that a blue suit would entail an additional cost. Undeterred by the potential expense, the widow, teary-eyed but resolute, reached into her purse and handed the director a blank check. With a soft smile, she said, "Please use this check to cover any expenses necessary to make my husband look his best." Grateful for her understanding and commitment to honoring her husband's memory, the director accepted the check. He then began making the arrangements to procure a fine blue suit for the deceased. On the day of the funeral, family and friends gathered to pay their last respects to the dearly departed. As the casket was opened for viewing, everyone marveled at how distinguished and elegant the man appeared in his stylish blue suit. The widow couldn't have been more pleased. The funeral service proceeded with heartfelt eulogies and a sense of closure for all in attendance. Once the ceremony concluded, the funeral director approached the widow with her blank check, which had gone unused. Curious, the widow looked at him and asked, "Why are you returning this check to me?" With a warm and compassionate smile, the funeral director explained, "Well, it's a rather unusual situation, ma'am. After you left, another widow arrived at our funeral home to make arrangements for her late husband. As fate would have it, her husband had already been dressed in a very fine, stylish blue suit. When I inquired if she had any specific preferences regarding his attire, she mentioned that it didn't matter to her. So, to accommodate her wishes, I simply switched the heads. And there you have it, a tale of two widows, a blue suit, and a funeral director's adaptability." Once upon a time, in a world that felt a little less hectic, a man woke up one morning with a renewed sense of purpose. He was determined to take better care of himself and embark on a path to healthier living. The stars seemed to align perfectly as he made these noble resolutions, ready to face the world with newfound vigor. The man's ambitious plan consisted of 4 primary goals: smoking and drinking less, adopting a healthier diet, and embracing a more active lifestyle through exercise. With his head held high and hope in his heart, he stepped out of bed, ready to conquer the day and make a change for the better. As the hours ticked away, the man faithfully adhered to his self-imposed regimen. He resisted the urge to light up a cigarette, savor the taste of alcohol, and instead opted for a glass of refreshing water. The kitchen shelves displayed vibrant fruits and vegetables, signaling the start of his dietary transformation. He even donned his workout attire and enthusiastically set out for a brisk walk. However, the world had other plans for our protagonist, and it wasn't long before his resolve began to wane. The weight of his ambitious goals pressed heavily upon him, and he realized that taking care of oneself was no easy feat. 4 hours ago, he had been a different person, younger, perhaps a tad more naive, and filled with a hopeful spirit that had now begun to fade. In the midst of his journey to healthier living, the man came face to face with temptation. The allure of a cigarette's soothing embrace was almost too much to resist. The idea of a fine glass of whiskey called to him, and the vision of a delectable, indulgent meal danced before his eyes. In the end, his noble aspirations seemed to dim with each passing moment. In the span of mere hours, the man's enthusiasm had begun to wane, and he realized that the path to healthier living was filled with unforeseen challenges and temptations. While he had initially woken up with a heart full of hope, he couldn't help but reflect on the days when he was younger, perhaps a bit more foolish, and possessed the unwavering optimism of youth. And so, the man found himself at a crossroads, a pivotal moment where he had to decide whether to persist in his quest for healthier living or revert to his old ways. As he stood on the precipice of choice, he couldn't help but yearn for those earlier hours when his determination was unyielding and hope seemed boundless.